Welcome to Unfiltered Talks with Shahnaz Mirza. I am Shahnaz Mirza. Today, we are diving into the complex world of teenagers. Our guest, a renowned psychologist, who shall share with us insights on the behavioral changes, bodily changes, and societal expectations that teens face. Ivan is a psychologist who has worked with children and adults in therapy as well as in education. His background in SEN, special education needs, led him to become a SENCO, and his PhD focuses on how psychology and education intersect. He has also served as a school principal, giving a deep understanding of well-being and behavior across individual and system levels. He is also the co-founder of Pinnacle International, a local company offering UK-accredited higher education programs in SEN and psychology to teachers, therapists, parents, and more. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely a pleasure. Now, teenagers, they live in a world where they believe that they are grown-ups. They're in between that stage. They're neither grown-ups, they're neither children. And they have their own set of rules. They want things their way. In your experience with teenagers, what are the set of behavioral changes that you normally notice in them in this age group?
Teenagers don't become more difficult. They actually become more emotionally aware, but they don't have the tools to actually manage that. So what we see is the withdrawal, the conflict in the house, them not exactly knowing how to deal with the emotions. Mm-hmm. So from a psychological perspective, I would say this is all normal developmental hurdles.
Right.
However, I think it's when it becomes constant and when the avoidance or the withdrawal becomes more serious, when we really have to take notice.
All right. So as a parent, if I have teenagers, my children are now already grown up, but if I had teenagers, what are the kind of concerning behaviors? Because for you as a specialist, you would know, but for a lay person, what are the kind of behaviors that I should be spotting in them at that stage?
I think we'll see a lot of conflict as they become teenagers, but I think when they can return after conflict, when they can go back to you as a parent, have another conversation, when they still laugh, when they are still engaging, then it's completely normal. It's all part of the normal developmental cycle. However, when they become constantly avoidant, when they withdraw to such a degree when you really feel it's not them anymore, then you have to take note. You have to really then step in.
All right. So basically you might see them arguing for everything, not responding. Are these some of the symptoms maybe or signs that parents will be looking out for?
Absolutely. If they constantly are arguing, but again, a lot of that is normal. I think they will be pushing the boundaries. This is part of the developmental cycle. They'll try to see how far they can push the boundary because they are becoming young adults.
Right.
However, when they can't go back to the parent afterwards, when they can't have a normal conversation, when they become fixated on the argumentative spirit, then I think it's something to...
All right. At that stage, when they feel that maybe the parents are not able to sort them or understand them, then a lot of times they would look for outside, maybe the friend, father of a friend, mother of a friend, or some neighbor. In that situation, how is it, of course, that we want that our children should be safe and not in the wrong hands? And on one side, we're also trying to assess this kind of their need being understood. Is there anything at that stage where we know that they have their mood swings, they're not able to open up with us? And what should we do at this stage? Is it advisable now to come and approach a therapist or still do something on our own as parents?
Yeah. I think you hit quite a lot of points in that question. I would say yes to the first part, where they usually seek advice from outside, not necessarily from inside the house. Usually I would see this in schools. They'll usually come and confide in a teacher, a school counselor first, before they speak to the parents openly. Now, that's still very much normal developmental behavior. I would say what we can do as parents, and to get to the later part of the question, is we still need to also create a environment of safety. Because as parents, sometimes, especially when a lot of conflict happens within the house, then we are also very reactive. We need to create psychological safety by becoming less reactive, first and foremostly. So when they do open up, we need to create a space where we don't judge, we don't react immediately. We need to regulate ourselves first before we address the situation. And that might be really difficult sometimes. It might be really hard for parents to do. But if you can create that space, and also maybe if you can engage with a therapist, I think the combination of those two will definitely help.
Brilliant. Yeah, I believe that is very well said, that safe space, because I think children need to trust the parent, whether I will be heard, whether my emotions will be understood. And a lot of times, if that safe space is not created, they will never come back to you.
Yes.
So that is very important. But I believe that will take time. So if from a very young age, teenagers have not been, provided with that kind of space, they may not. But it's never too late, I believe, whenever parents feel that, yes, this is something that their children are going through, they could start pulling them in tiny conversations. So one or two maybe steps or tips that you provide at that stage, or maybe for parents that you can list out, how can they do that? How can they create that safe space? How can they create that bond again, which has not been formed maybe in the early formidable years?
If we look at it from a psychological perspective, and usually in therapy, I would say we focus on emotions first, because emotions that's unresolved leads into anxiety, and then the anxiety goes into defense mechanisms. So what we need to do, and this is what I always advise parents, is not only do we need to create a safe space, we also need to start to create emotional literacy with the teenagers. We need to teach them how to voice their emotions, how to feel their emotions, how to know what they are feeling. Because usually as a therapist, a lot of times, in actual fact, I would say 90% of the times, I would sit across from someone in therapy and I would ask them, how do you feel? And usually the answer is, I'm not quite sure, or they might not be able to label the emotion correctly. They might say, I'm sad when they're angry, or they might say, I'm angry when I'm sad.
Okay.
So I think it's focusing on what does the emotion look like? And that's hard sometimes, because I would say to some adults when we deliver training, for example, at schools, I would say to them, how many emotions do we have? Can we list them? And then it's very difficult, because the entire room of adults, they can't even agree on how many emotions we have. So I think it's starting from the basics.
Okay.
Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate form of perfection, right? I think it's looking at simplicity of it, understanding the basic core emotions. Anger, what does it look like? How do you feel in your body? Sadness, how do you feel? How does it make you feel? How does it make you look? How are you perceiving having an emotion? Fear. And I think it's an important juncture to also talk about anxiety, because anxiety itself is not an emotion.
Right.
It's a response to not having a resolution to a certain emotion.
Right. Okay. You've listed quite a few things, but in simple terms, I believe that staying very close monitor to your children so that you're able to understand what they're feeling, that is important. Now, in terms of conversations, sometimes, because parents are parents, of course, they are handling a lot of things, whether it's a mom or a dad, and rather than understanding, they lash out. What is it in terms of communication that they should completely avoid, which is a no-no, so that they don't get into the trap of driving the children even all the more away?
Yes. I think it's so important to regulate yourself first as a parent, because they will respond how you respond. And in every circumstance, this goes back to creating a psychological safety in the house. This goes back to, you have to be able to also respond with a certain element of calmness. You have to be able to respond with openness. You have to be able to meet them at their level in terms of what
the
they need.
emotions or what they're going through at that stage. Okay. Perfectly well said. Yeah. So maybe if you're angry, they're angry, not have the conversation then.
Yes.
Say, okay, I'll talk to you in a bit, and then take it at a different time when you've calmed down and you're able to come down to their level. Yes.
Yes, I think it's also important for parents to not push, because sometimes a lot of parents do push in conversations. They want some answers. Now,
Right.
like I said, it's emotions first, and it's hard for teenagers to deal with their emotions, then creates a certain level of anxiety. If a parent is then pursuing and pushing on top of that, wanting answers or maybe criticizing, that will of course increase the anxiety, which will increase the defense mechanisms. That will not have any resolution.
Right.
So what they need to do is dial it back. Rather ask them, how do they feel? What are they experiencing at the minute? And it's completely fine to say, okay, we don't have to deal with this right now.
Right now.
You can take a minute, go think about it, come back to me. Or you don't have to explain to me.
All right.
Just know that I'm here and I'm ready to listen to you whenever you feel like sharing.
Yeah. Now, since we're going through this, going back and forth between the parent and child, is there like a time frame that you need to get it addressed? Or is it better that we let go of some time and then we confront them? Or is it just that when we feel that we're calm, they're calm, and it's a good time? Because sometimes, if you've got a lot of time pass by, the child will have forgotten that issue and gone on, and maybe it needs to be addressed. So let's look at the time frame, basically.
I agree. And I think even for parents, it's important, because as teenagers do deal with their own emotions, if it's not resolved, it will again increase anxiety, accumulate. So for parents, I think they need to address it, but they need to address it in a calm manner, and they need to give some time, because space is important as well. It's important to regulate, giving them some autonomy, giving them some space, keeping it balanced, because you are the parents still.
Right. Now, social media. Social media in today's world, it plays such an important role, and children are exposed to social media in all sorts of ways, good or bad. So the first question when we have children, teenagers and adolescents, how can we can't be very controlling because they will just shut down and move away. But we want them to take it easy with the social media. How should we introduce this with this batch of children, the teenagers?
Social media is so important to address because psychologically it has a massive impact.
Right.
And I think what it does is it shifts the focus from internal to the external. So what happens is that they will look for external validation rather than internal validation. They'll start to compare. They'll start to have a look at everyone else and feel the societal pressures. Now, it's important for parents to not only address the social media aspect of it, keep it balanced. We can't control it completely, because if we control it completely, of course, that will create some rebellious spark within the teenager. But it's important to address it in a balanced way, but also to role model where validation comes from, to role model that also how we speak about ourselves. If we focus on the external, if we focus on how we look, then of course they're going to focus on how they look. If we talk about people's appearances, of course, they will again draw that back to their own appearance. And this is a critical stage in their life where appearances and bodily changes and all of that takes a big toll on a teenager. So I think it's important to role model how we perceive and how we interact with the world, but also to keep the social media balanced. And that can look completely different as well. I think, for example, if you say to the teenager, you're too much on social media, I'm taking your phone away every night at 8, I'm going to keep you with me, and you're going to be on the couch scrolling on your phone, they're going to feel it's unjust, it's a mistreatment towards them. They're going to be angry. That anger is going to turn into anxiety, and that's going to turn into defense mechanisms. If you want to address it correctly, the way to do it is to start the conversation from the external, to say, right, maybe as an example, I've read an article that said blue light's really bad for your sleeping pattern. So what we're going to do as an entire household, we're all going to put our phones down at 8 o'clock, do a bit of reading before I get to bed. And then you also have to abide by it, because we set an example. You have to be a role model. And I think that's a way to address the social media element without getting into any form of confrontation.
Very well said, yes. If you have rules for your children and you tell them 8 p.m., put your phones away, and there you are scrolling, they will never do it. So parents, if you're watching this, yes, you need to walk the talk. So make sure you have that time guideline and the rules set for yourself.
Exactly.
Perfect. Now let's move to the physical changes. Let's move to the physical changes, the bodily changes. And if you could quickly highlight what exactly the bodies are going through at that time, and then we go to the physiological changes as well.
I think, again, it's such a difficult time for teenagers. They realize the physical changes that are happening with their body. And again, this focuses the attention on the external, and social media, again, it's not helping. So a lot of it is about, how do I look? Do I fit in? How are people at school perceiving me? And I think it's important to realize that that's not only a superficial struggle, it's actually really a deep emotional struggle for teenagers. And sometimes I see parents dismissing it quite often. I think you have to realize that it is difficult and it's something that they will deal with. It's a given. Now, how do we help them navigate that? Again, it's about how we speak. It's about what we put our attention towards. Instead of saying, you look pretty, or you're handsome, say to them, you know what, you are really strong, or job well done, you've done really good. Praise them for who they are, not for how they look. I think that's a good start.
Yeah, perfectly well said, because a lot of times we've noticed, and especially from the part that I come, South Asians, we always focus on, oh, you're looking so pretty today. Oh, your hair is looking beautiful. Your skin is. So we do not praise them for what they've done. They've achieved something. They've scored well. They've won a race. Brilliantly done. Well done. Go for it, which will build their confidence even more. So yeah, perfectly well said with that. And besides that, also, they're always looking for validation, I believe. So parents at that stage, or teachers, educators who are watching at this stage, as you mentioned, yes, we need us to kind of build that confidence. Anything else that we can also do so that we are raising confident young teenagers who would go into adults feeling their self-worth, their self-esteem?
Yeah, they're looking for validation. They're looking for validation from adults, from their friends. So I think it's important to positively praise, give them the validation that they're seeking. But again, praising the character, praising the achievements that they have done, and not overpraising one particular element. You get the flip side. You get parents that might be thinking they're doing really good, praising their external looks. Wow, you look really pretty or handsome, like we just said. But we also get the other parents that praise maybe only academic achievements, and that put a different level of pressure on them. So I think it's about praising the character and also showing them that it matters who you are, not what you look like or what your only achievements are. It's about you as a holistic person. So I think it's important to consider that and choose your words carefully as parents. I think sometimes we can also be very critical and maybe say something that can hurt a lot. Remember, we sometimes forget what it was like to be teenagers, and maybe a small little comment like, oh, why did you put your hair up like that? Or why did you do A, B, C, and D? Or that doesn't look very good. That cuts quite deep.
Then that would stay with them, yeah.
Yes.
And I think now, as children getting into teenagers, that group are so much aware because of social media. Mm-hmm. In our time, parents did say a lot of mean things to us, and we still scrape through it. They would say, oh, what is that silly hairstyle? You're looking like, crazy. You're looking silly. Go change this. go change that. But now I believe children are getting more aware as well because they have social media all around them. And certain issues that teenagers normally go through, since we're talking about their bodily, there is acne on their face, which can really pull them down. There are, of course, they want to look the best because of their peers and all that. And as you mentioned, I think the best way is, again, that they build the character. So for parents, I think at this stage, if they've done something nice and kind, help somebody in the grocery, push a trolley, help somebody cross a road, things like those, you mean, right?
Absolutely.
To build their character.
I think character building is so important. I also think that it's important to have a look at your teenager holistically, especially if we're talking about the physical, the psychological. If you really want them to be well balanced, then you have to, number one, also play the role model, but you have to make sure that they are well balanced. You have to talk about nutrition. You have to talk about physical activity. You have to talk about the mental well-being. Because for me, as a therapist, I always look at the holistic development. And I think all of those elements that you just mentioned also plays a role, because acne, there's some nutritional elements that can take care of acne to a large extent, not completely. Sometimes medication is necessary, but I think it's important to stay away from certain elements of junk food. And likewise, even if they have a learning disability, for example, ADHD, it's really important to also think about nutrition and the effect that it will have on ADHD. So I think if we talk about the physical, then we also need to include everything else because it's holistic. Right. Yeah, well said. So parents should look out for the holistic development and building them completely rather than just looking at one small part of it. All right. So besides that, we've seen the acne, which a lot of teenagers go through, and also they want to look fit. Are there also any other concerns which relates to health that parents should worry about for their children, Absolutely.
teenagers?
I think this goes hand in hand with the holistic development. I think we need to think about it from that perspective. We need to consider healthy habits in terms of eating, healthy habits in terms of sleep, healthy habits in terms of what we are saying, what we're doing, and how we're dealing with emotions. So I think really it's holistic. And I think, again, I'm going to come back to the role model element. If you are a parent and you're encouraging healthy habits of sleep, then you have to also live it out. You can't say, look, you have to go to sleep, but then
and you're awake, partying, watching TV.
Exactly, up until 2-3 in the morning.
Right.
You have to set an example.
Right.
But I think it's also about how do you set an example, live it out, but also not completely restrict them. Because I find this is difficult for parents. I think it's important for parents to think about it in a different way. You have to ask the questions to get them to think about it themselves. You have to ask them, how do you feel since you only got 2 hours of sleep? Or how do you feel if you are doom scrolling the entire day? And they might even have a snappy comment. They might have a snappy remark saying, I feel completely fine. But they will know the effects that less sleep had on them, or maybe being on the phone too much.
Right.
And I think asking those questions, making them realize first before you put anything into place. And I think also it's about creating a balance. It's about creating a balance in such a way where you don't completely control. Because if you completely control, a teenager needs some autonomy and they need to make decisions by themselves. They need to also come to realizations by themselves. We need to give them the tools and step back and have a look how they are handling it. And we can coach from the side, but it's not about completely controlling, because what we are going to do then is create anxiety, and that's not what we want to do. We want to move away from creating the anxiety.
All right, perfect. Yeah, being the role model, parents, that's well said. If you're not doing what you want them to do, they will never do it perfectly. So whether it's sleep, whether it's nutrition, eating healthy, whether it's even exercising, they will watch you and watch, and take it up after that. Now, since you've mentioned that there is some amount of stress also that they will go through, that is where the physiological regulation comes in. And I think teenagers at this stage, there is a competition going on, whether it's the peers in school to be the favorite kid, popular with the rest of the group, being the favorite child of the parent, or for that matter, the teacher. These things are always going through the mind of the child. How is it here that we can get rid of that stress that they're going through, or in some way regulate their physiological, I would say psychological well-being, so that they do not feel always in that spirit of competition?
I think you make a good argument. The spirit of competition, I think it's about comparing. And the societal pressures are there. So I think we can't remove the comparison element. We can't remove societal pressures. We can't remove the fact that the world looks completely different to when, let's say, for example, we were young. What we can do is we can empower them with the tools to be able to regulate their emotions. And that's how I always start my therapy sessions. I would first and foremostly start to empower the teenager across from me, saying to them, okay, let's start with emotions. It's not about labeling the emotions, it's about knowing when you feel them. So you need to look at the physical elements of your body. This will guide you to what emotions you feel. For example, if you think about the last time someone made you really angry, and I want you to take a minute and think about that, right? Just take a minute, think about it. Try to envision yourself in that space. How do you feel physically? When we're angry, how do we feel physically? And whoever's listening, I want you to do the same. Because what you will notice is most likely
you're outraged. Yeah.
You're outraged.
You want to say something back.
Exactly, that's good. You want to say something back. How about physically? What physical manifestations do we have in our body? Does our temperature go up or down?
Yeah, you get really up. You're heated up. Your body's maybe shaking. You want to
shaking,
hit. You want to come forward and attack the person.
Charged with all this energy. Yeah. So that's what I say to the teenager. Let's have a look. Sometimes I draw it. Okay, how do you feel? How do you feel in your chest? Okay, your heart is palpitating. Okay, good. How do you feel in your jaw? You're clenching your jaw. Are you sweating or are you not sweating? Do you feel the heat? Or are you not feeling the heat? Okay, how does your body language look? It's looking upright. It's looking open. Why? Because you want to go into that fight mode. So those are some physical manifestations. There are quite many. I take an entire session to talk about this because they need to understand this is what anger looks like. Because next time they sit in a position and they don't know exactly what they feel, they would be able to label, oh, you know what, I'm angry. Why? And then I teach them how to deal with it.
How to regulate that anger.
Exactly. Because if you think about sadness, for example, it's exactly the opposite. Instead of heat, you get cold, right? Your heart rate doesn't go up, it goes down. And your temperature goes down. Your voice becomes softer. Your body language is enclosed.
Yeah.
So it's completely the opposite. And then sometimes in therapy, people still confuse the two.
What is the feeling that they're going through?
They don't know. Am I sad? Am I fearful? Am I angry? What am I? So for me, how you can empower your teenager as a parent is you can help them understand what physical manifestations are connected to which emotion.
Which emotion.
That's the first step, labeling the emotion.
Correct.
But also then role modeling as a parent that every emotion has its place. Right. Don't label anger as negative. Don't label sadness as negative. Don't say to them, no, stop crying. Don't.
Okay.
Allow them to express the emotion. This is in every single culture. We have parents that don't allow anger, don't allow sadness.
Yeah, especially
sometimes
if it's a boy.
Don't allow fear. I know.
Yeah.
And there's some stigma on both ends because boys have a little bit more leeway to be angry, whereas girls don't.
Cannot,
And then girls can be a bit more sad, and boys can't.
Yeah, this is
this is a problem.
Right.
Because what are we teaching?
Yeah.
And now, what are they doing? They're going to repress some of the emotions.
Right, based on what they've been fed by their parents themselves. Yeah.
And if you suppress your emotion, it will turn into anxiety, no doubt. Right. And that will turn into defense mechanisms.
Right, okay.
Yes, I think so. I think that's That's a basic. You know.
Okay. So you did tell us, that parents should be able to first understand with their children what is the emotion. If they're not able to understand, and then role model that. So for example, if the boy or girl is extremely angry, now parent has identified it, they've calmed them down, they've spoken about it, then how should the child next time is angry react? What should the parent tell the child? Okay, next time you feel like this, what should he do? Because he's been lashing out, maybe extreme cases of throwing things around, yelling, getting his blood pressure high. But now you want him to be regulated. And you're not a therapist, you're a parent. So what should you say if you're saying that it's okay to show the anger? What should he show or behave?
I think it's a really good question. And I think it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to deal with the anger in certain ways. Now, every emotion you can deal in 3 ways. Every emotion. You can deal with anger, sadness, and fear, and the rest in 3 different ways. You can either act it out, which is the example you just gave.
Throwing things.
Someone's acting it out. If they're angry, they're going to shout, they're going to scream, they might throw something, they might physically attack someone, they might be passive-aggressive, right? They might slam a door, they might walk away. You see this even in workplaces with adults, even more so in teenagers. So I think that's one way. It's not the correct way to deal with it. The other way is to repress. If you repress anger, it's also not very good, because immediately it goes into anxiety and the defense mechanisms coming up. They're becoming more avoidant. They're withdrawing. So you need to find a middle ground. You need to teach them, yes, sometimes you will become angry, especially if someone mistreats you. But the way to deal with it is, number 1, label, understand, label that you're angry. Yes, I'm angry. Then secondly, take a step back, understand why are you angry, and then maybe speak to someone, speak to the parent, right? Encourage them to speak to you. And then maybe address the person that made you angry. Because usually anger is from, someone that mistreated someone else.
Exactly.
Whether or not that's true or just perceived, that's a different question. But the way that parents can teach their teenagers to deal with it is to, number 1, label, understand when they are angry.
Right.
But secondly, okay, there are ways to deal with your anger. You have to deal with it correctly. Don't repress it. Don't act it out. Try to contain the anger. Try to come and speak to me so I can give you some advice, or speak to a friend, for example.
Perfect.
But you want to also role model. So you can't be giving them emotional literacy, but then in the household, you're slamming doors.
Things, yes, perfect.
And throwing things.
Throwing everything,
raising
yelling.
your voice.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah.
Lead by example.
Lead by example, yeah. So parents have to get this in their mind. They have to lead by example. Well said. And I will just reiterate for our audiences, it's very necessary first to understand the emotion, label it, okay, I'm angry or I'm sad, and then see what has caused that emotion. Exactly. What is the reason, who has triggered it or what has triggered it, and then look at how I can deal with it. Talk to maybe a parent who's available, or maybe in the school if there is a therapist, a counselor, who's available. Well said. All right. Now, it's great, all these tips, but a lot of times households or parents, or maybe just the way that they are, children and teenagers, we don't get to that situation where we're able to. And sometimes it has crossed the line already. And now, if a parent has noticed the child does not want to listen, he's shut up completely. He's not, because, okay, my parent, my dad, my mom, they don't understand. Parent has understood this and they want to fix it. They can't. Is that the time that they can approach a therapist?
Absolutely.
And what is it that we can start with at that stage?
Absolutely. I think a therapist will definitely fill the gap in that instance. I think it's always important to also consider your therapist and make sure that the therapists have a good grasp, because you get different therapists and you get different therapeutical models that they would like to use. You get different therapists that focus on particular elements. Find a therapist suitable most to you, screen them, have a good conversation, see if your values align. But have an open communication with the therapist. Be an active participant in the therapeutical process.
Right.
Don't just give the teenager to the therapist and expect the therapist to
fix everything.
To fix everything.
Okay.
You need to be able to also engage in that. You need to be
Right.
able to ask your teenager afterwards, how do you feel? How was today's session? What did you learn? What would you like to share? Is there anything? I'm here if you want to speak. I'm here. Make yourself available. Make yourself open. Don't make yourself judgmental. And it sounds like during this conversation that I'm quite hard on parents, but I'm not. I'm just reiterating the missteps that we all make. We all do a certain level of miscalculation when we deal with different humans, not even only our own teenagers. When we work with humans, when we interact with others, sometimes we would role model. Sometimes we would act very carefully, we choose our words very carefully, but sometimes we would not.
Right.
So I'm just trying to say, look, in this instance, I think it's important for yourself to regulate first, and then that will also cause a certain level of calmness, because your calm becomes their calm. You guide the psychological safety within the household. And I think that's important for us to understand.
Now, in terms of the societal pressure, what we see coming in at us from outside, there is always stress. There is academic stress because they have to go through examinations, get a certain level of marks or grades, or get into this course, get into that course. How can parents at this stage, we all want our children to succeed. We all want them to do brilliantly well in their academics, be it sports or academics or their lives. But that regulation, I believe, at this stage is very necessary so that we're not pressurizing them extra when it comes. So as a parent now, how do we balance this part of it where they have to study, they have to learn, they have to do well academically or with the sports, or they're put into classes and things like that to achieve such a lot?
Yeah, it's hard. And I think it's hard for every single teenager and every single parent, to be honest. I think you use the right word, balance. I think you have to have a certain element of balance. And the balance is not necessarily only lifestyle. It's about giving the teenager the psychological safety to be able to approach it if they needed to, but also giving them enough autonomy so they can make their own mistakes. Because look, we're not perfect as parents. No one is perfect, right? We will also fumble sometimes. We need to teach them. It's not about what mistakes you make, but how you get up after making a mistake, how you try to correct it. And in this instance, they have to have some level of autonomy within their own lives to be able to make mistakes. And then you should not be very harsh on them when they do. Be there to support, because they will make mistakes. Be there to help them deal with the societal pressures. If we give them emotional literacy, if we give them safe space, if we talk to them, give them an example of how to deal with certain elements and problems, then we are setting them up for success, not for failure. But of course, we'll sometimes have more deeper struggles than other times. Teenagers differ. And in that case, if you provide all of those and you provide a supportive base for them, if the foundation is one of support and it's strong enough, then they should be okay. But this also goes back to the societal pressures links to the social media element. They'll always be comparing. And I think it's, again, important for them to also realize that it's about the person who they are, not exactly what they do or how they look.
Right.
But they will discover if you give enough leeway and you give enough balance for them to have a certain level of autonomy, but the support when they need it, they'll be okay.
Right, okay. And I believe that parents, it should not come just around because they will see their behavior going kind of crazy in the teenage years, but their intervention should start in right from the beginning, from the time they're toddlers, rather than just waiting that, okay, now they're teenagers, and then wondering, why are they not behaving the way I want to? What is going wrong and things like that. So yes, I think that is so important, and to build the character, as you already mentioned. Now, besides the fact that, okay, we are seeing them go through the pressures in life and everything, but there are some extreme cases where we see all around. You see sometimes children have taken up the gun in the US. You have cases of those. From the country that I come, India, you see there is a lot of crime also, and sometimes it does involve juveniles, younger teenagers and things like that. So I'm just kind of thinking, does that kind of start manifesting at a very young age because of certain things that they've gone through childhood trauma, or certain things that were absent in their lives, or what is it that leads such children to behave to that manner?
In the majority of times, it would be something that started in childhood, and I think it would be neglect, or it would be a certain amount of pressures. There would be a multitude of things, but it will come down to them unable to regulate their own emotions, and maybe absent parents in those cases. Now, that's not 100% of all cases. There would also be a small amount of cases where it might be peer pressure. It might happen out of the blue. So it's not always 100%. This is
the reason why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think those are all very much socioeconomical, or not all, but a majority of it. I think it also differs from country to country. I think it's something that we need to all be aware of. And I think we just need to look for the certain signs in the teenagers, the danger signs. And we've spoken today about quite a lot of it, but it's when the teenager becomes withdrawn or completely avoidant, or become really angry and they have outbursts more often than not. I think those are warning signs, not necessarily from something as devastating as those examples you just given, but something that needs to be addressed in a professional context. And I think the earlier you address it, the better.
Right.
Sometimes we still have the stigma of therapy, not going to therapy, or you know what, we can deal with this as a family ourselves. I've seen that many times. And I think even that is a challenge to some degree, because you need to also be able to be open for help.
Correct.
You need to be able to be open for change. So I think it's important. It's important to look for those triggers.
Yeah,
and address.
Right. This is something very important that you mentioned, that sometimes we miss out on the red flags. So as you said, I will reiterate that you've seen them withdrawn. You've seen them excessively getting angry. These are all red flags. Yes. So parents should be on the lookout for this, the red flags. And then at that stage, of course, maybe you're not able to tackle it. So approach a therapist so that they can kind of understand what is happening and what they're going through.
This is what therapists are there for. And I think also, I want to say, we need to understand therapy from a parental perspective, because what I've seen in the therapeutical practice is also people sometimes think it's either medication or therapy, or they don't want the medication at all, which that's completely fine, but then you have to deal with the therapy in a really holistic manner.
Right.
But what I really want to stress is it's not, the medication doesn't replace therapy.
Right.
In instances where, especially in those instances where it's quite serious, just getting medication from a psychiatrist will not necessarily tackle the cause, the underlying cause, because we need to remember behavior is all communication. Every single behavior is a form of communication. It's what lies underneath. We need to understand that in order for us to be able to address it. So I think it's really important at this juncture to tell parents, look, if that's the case and you've gone the next step, you've reached out to a doctor, a psychiatrist, a specialist, you got some medication. It doesn't stop there. The medication is going to treat the symptom. It's not going to treat the underlying cause. Then therapy needs to go hand in hand with this. They need to be able to walk the entire path get to a place where they've dealt with the underlying issue,
Got it.
and then reintegrate.
As you mentioned in the previous answer, that yes, there is still a lot of, kind of, I would say, stigma or taboo when it comes to approaching somebody for therapy or fixing your mental disorders, because we are still in this century and we still believe that this is something that you cannot talk about, or there is so much of societal pressure. I believe that it is time that we start making this a common thing, that it's perfectly fine. You're going through something in your mind. When we have bodily ailments, we go to the doctor, get it checked, shown, and everything. And the same with the mind.
Yeah.
The mind is an organ that needs attention and to be treated. So parents should go and address that and approach therapists. And besides now, schools and other support systems, parents have approached therapists, therapists have given their input. Also for schools to kind of come in and play their part, or larger as a community, I'm not sure here in Doha if we have a lot, but how can we have community support at this stage?
I think that's such an important question. And I think even myself and my business partner here in Doha, we really try to help schools with this, because I'm from a therapeutical background, she's from an educational background, and we work with parents, teenagers, children, but also schools. We try to bridge the gap with the need, and we know what the need is. We've seen time and time again, especially from working with schools here, that sometimes there's a big disconnect. There's a disconnect between the parents, the school, and the therapist. And I think all three of them, they need to be able to have open conversations. They need to be able to be in contact. There needs to be a team around the child. And this is what we've done when we worked in schools. What we've done is we addressed it in such a way where we will approach the therapist, and we worked with amazing therapists in Doha as well. And we'd say, okay, let's say, for example, this particular child, what exactly are you doing in therapy? And can we replicate some of that in school? And parents, what are you doing at home? Can we replicate some of the therapeutical elements at a house? And can we all communicate maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month, just so we can all be on the same page? Because if a child has, let's say, for example, it's early years, not a teenager, and they're getting a multitude of different therapies. They're getting occupational, speech therapy, ABA therapy, psychotherapy, and they are going to school. It's quite a lot. It's a hefty timetable. But all of them use different language. They use different language to praise. All of them are focusing on different elements. If you are working in school and you're focusing on, let's say, for example, vehicles in this week in class, as a word, as an element, you can embed that into the speech therapy. Because I can pick up the phone, I can tell the speech therapist, look, they're doing jungle animals this week. Can you use that in the speech therapy? And the same for the ABA therapist. Can you use those type of toys in this week? So all of them start to move towards one element. And also, can we replicate the praise? Can we all say, good job, high five? Can we all do that? Because again, especially if we're working with younger years, and I know this podcast is not about younger years, but as an example, this is what you can do if you really think about it holistically. So it's about really working together. And I think schools play such an important part in this equation. I think a lot of schools have counselors in place, but they don't necessarily have the training that's needed. In those instances, they need to upskill themselves to get the training that's needed to be the bridge in this gap, to connect the parents with the teachers and maybe give the therapist a call and ask them what are they doing. Schools work from a systematic point of view, trying to provide the support. But like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times the student will go to the school first and say something to them, say to a school counselor or a teacher that they trust, I'm struggling with A, B, C, and D. So those individuals have a responsibility, and they need to be also able to address that responsibility. They need to provide support, because And I think you mentioned here in Doha, you're not sure about that level of support. Yes, I think it could definitely be addressed, but I also think that at least from the schools that I've seen, you always have very willing, engaging teachers and counselors. So I think the will is there. I think it's just about making the connection between all of those parties involved, because then we will truly see the effect of intervention.
Perfect. Parents, it's that trio, you would say the trio, where it's parents on one end with their children, with the schools, or if not a school, there is a therapist involved there, should work so closely so that, we kind of bring out that balance for that child going through something. Now, in terms of addressing certain concerns, like if the topic is something very sensitive, because this is the age now they get into knowing their own body part, they're trying to understand what it means, for us to reproduce, what it means for, the female or the male private parts. These are very sensitive topics. How does one deal with this? And I know in certain cultures, it's not even talked about. From where I came, our culture, we don't talk about it. So the child has to go out and get the information, which they may get all the wrong information.
That's exactly the point.
Parents now, how do they tackle this?
I think you hit the nail on the head, because if you don't address it, they will go out. They will get it from somewhere else. So my advice here, and I think it's important, is for parents to address this head on with full transparency. And this might be extremely difficult, especially for some parents. But I think it's important. It's important because you don't want them to get the wrong information from other parties, from their peers. You'd rather be transparent, give them the right information. Give them something that they know exactly, okay, this is what the situation is, this is what I can expect, or whatever the case may be. So my advice here would be, if you have a daughter, the mom should talk to the daughter. If you have a son, the father should talk to the son. They should have a frank, open conversation, as difficult as it might be, and discuss and ask them what questions you have. And you'll be surprised. And when I had these discussions with parents, sometimes they'd ask me, when is the right age? It's a hard question, because sometimes we underestimate what is out there in social media, what questions they might have at what age. I think start when they move into the teenage years. I think it's a good space to try to see when is the right time to have this conversation. Sit them down, prepare yourself adequately, have the conversation frankly, and then if they have any questions, tell them openly, come back to me, ask me the questions. I'll be more than happy to help, because then you set a precedent for they can come and ask. It's safe. It's okay. They're not going to be judged. And I think that's important. You want to set that tone, because the last thing you want as a parent is for them to do anything that they're not supposed to do in secret, and they don't understand necessarily the consequences of their own actions.
Well said. And of course, if, for example, now parents are not able to at any stage talk, we've seen them go through the teenage years, the years are building on, and at some stage they feel that it is now maybe something that is of great concern. Can they bring in the therapist at that stage and say, okay, you need to go? And maybe they're not even able to tell the child why I need to go, but is there something that, at that stage, the parents can tell them, discuss it with the therapist and say, here, so-and-so is going to help you out understand a few of these challenging phases.
Absolutely. And I think as therapists, we deal with a lot of different variations of issues or problems or challenges. And we have a lot of parents that say, look, like you said, it's gone far past the point of addressing. Can you please build that relationship? And as a third party, it's always much easier, because we are trained. We know how to build a relationship first. It's not going to be 1 or 2 sessions. You need to build that relationship, that rapport, get the trust of the teenager. But then once you have the trust, and of course, I think it's important for parents to also understand. I'll get back to that point, but once you have the trust, address whatever is necessary. But I think it's important for parents to understand, because there's a teenager, there's a certain level of trust that the child has with the therapist. There's a certain level of confidentiality which is in play, depending on what code of conduct you're using. And I think that's really important, because sometimes parents want all the information. What did they say? You can try to be the midway between the parent, and you can try to help with the communication between the two parties, but of course you're not going to be able to divulge every single element that they have said. You can have a conversation with the parents, get them to understand this is what's happening, or this is how they're feeling, and maybe you can provide some advice to the parent saying, I think this is the question you should be asking. I think this is how you should approach it. But
Perfect.
if you are going to divulge every single bit of information, then you're not going to have any trust from the teenager, and also then you'll have no impact in
Right, yeah.
therapeutically.
The issue will not be sorted out at the end if you keep...
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think to answer your question, the therapist can definitely address.
Can definitely address. Now, certain things at this stage, when dealing with these challenging situations, are a complete no that parents should not do, because you don't want the matter to get worse. You don't want them to just go away completely, to not, the moment that topic is mentioned, child get all flustered and walk away, or the parent. So what is the no? What are the things that they should not do at this stage?
Don't be reactive.
Okay.
Don't react very emotionally as a parent, regardless what the situation is. Try to first regulate yourself, provide a place of calmness, then address it in a calm manner. Don't react. Don't seem judging. And that's so difficult, because remember, it's one generation from the next. And of course, the world's changing, it's ever shifting. So sometimes what would have been totally unacceptable in our generation, of course, in the next generation, is completely different. However, you can still convey that message without being judgmental, because they are teenagers, they are in a space where the world is confusing. They're trying to find themselves. They're trying to understand the boundaries of their own being. They're trying to understand the boundaries of society. They are confused. If you go in with that perception already, regardless, you can be the best parent in the world. And many parents are the best parents in the world. I've seen some really, really amazing, fantastic parents. Regardless, they'll still be confused. It's only a small minority of teenagers that know exactly what they want to do. This is how they feel. This is how to regulate. And they get on with it. And they become whatever they want to become. And everything goes their way. Very small minority. And even in those instances, it's still really important to consider that something might not always go their way. But for the majority, you can be a perfect parent. You'll still have those challenges. So don't react. Be calm. And don't be judgmental. If you can do all three of those, then every other conversation becomes much more easier. And I think then it's about building that relationship with the teenager. And it's so difficult, because as the developmental cycle happens, you have this really good relationship with your infant, then they grow into just preteen, still have a good relationship. They hit the teenage years, all of a sudden their world
Things
changes.
are going out of
And
hand.
their personality changes for you as a parent. And you're wondering, how does this happen? But you have to remember, a lot of those things are normal developmental changes. Don't take it personally. Understand it for what it is. But still try to work on that relationship. You don't want to be overbearing, over-controlling, push them in a situation where they completely withdraw, and it's very difficult to restore that relationship. Try to be open. Try to keep a level head. Try to regulate yourself first.
Perfect. We need, first of all, when faced with these challenging situations, be calm ourselves, don't overreact, and definitely be non-judgmental. Now, we've seen all that parents are trying to address for their teenagers, but as parents, what are they going through in this part, and what is the self-care that parents need? Let's see what happens on the other side of the fence, some kind of self-care tips that you could suggest so they also can go through this easily,
It's a good question. I think it's important because sometimes as parents, you care so much for your family, you care so much for your teenagers and your children that sometimes you are the last person that you care about. And you have to also regulate your own emotion. You have to be in touch with what you're feeling. And sometimes that means take a pause. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? If you get anxiety, don't just push it aside. Don't just try to repress every single emotion. Realize what you're feeling. Try to experience what you're experiencing. And then put healthy habits in play. And when I'm saying healthy habits, again, in therapy, this is always a starting point. Okay, what does your life look like at the minute? What are you eating every day? Are you exercising? Are you getting any exercise? Okay, what are you doing for self-care? How are you dealing with your emotions when you feel it? Ask those questions because all of those things are also really important. And I really try to approach therapy in that way because ultimately the human is a holistic being. You have to address all of them. You have to have a little bit of exercise, whether that's walking, whether that's exercising in the gym, because throughout the day, we'll experience different emotions. As we already talked about anger, fear is very much the same. It charges your entire body with a certain amount of energy. That energy needs to be expended. If you don't expend it, it will turn into anxiety. And also health-wise, of course, it's good. But for me, I'm always thinking about the psychological perspective. For me, it's really important. So when I have clients and I tell them, right, from tomorrow, you're going to start on this exercise routine. This is really important. Sometimes it takes a bit of convincing, but once they get there, actually it has a really good impact on their mental health. So don't negate that. Don't just disregard that completely. Again, with food, it's the same. You have to have a balanced nutrition because if you don't, if you eat really high sugar foods, that will cause your cortisol levels to rise, spikes up. Yeah. It creates a certain level of anxiety within your body. It adds on top of your emotional anxiety. Right. So it's not a good idea. So parents, take a step back. Think about yourself. Regulate yourself first. Think about what it is that maybe you need to address in your own life. And remember that it's really important to have a look at yourself. Regulate yourself, and then of course your teenagers will follow. If you create a space of calmness, they will become your calm. So it's important. Think about all of those things. Ask yourself those questions. What are you doing? And then try to see where you can go from there.
Fabulous. Yes. Very well said. I believe that now when we go through all this, it's so important to look into your own self to see what are you eating, what does your food look like, what is your nutrition, does your day have any exercise and things like that. All right, Ivan. So I believe you also have an academy where you provide some kind of training for therapists and counselors. Could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Pinnacle International Academy. It's a local company, which me and my business partner have started. She's also very well known in the community. She's been a head here for 13 years. And we started the academy because we believe there's a gap in terms of development in schools and also in general, to be fair, with certain elements. So we provide UK accredited courses for teachers in special educational needs or psychology. We provide a course for counselors to become more aware about anything psychological, the psychological underlying issues that teenagers might face, and also how to deal with it in this context in particular. And then we've got many other courses in Pinnacle as well, which deal with a wide variety of different topics like accounting and finance and all of those. So that's one element of a company that we do. And we're incredibly happy to be able to share that with our community.
Now we've almost come to the end of this session. And for listeners or viewers and our audiences, is there any kind of guidance and support that you would like to leave before we close the episode?
It's not about asking what are the behaviors that you're seeing from a teenager, or even maybe from yourself. It's about what are you feeling. So try to think about your emotions. If you can take anything away from this episode, try to think about what are you experiencing, what emotions are you experiencing, so you can label them, so you can understand where is it coming from, what's the origin, and what to do with that. And if you can't really label your emotions, think about what are you feeling physiologically. Are you feeling maybe the high heart palpitations? Are you feeling all of those things that anger represent? Are you maybe feeling sadness? Have you lost anything? Are you feeling fear, immediate fear or future fear? There are a few things that you can ask yourself, but I think focus on what you're feeling, because then you know what's underlying. Behavior is just a form of communication, and behavior is really the symptom in every instance. And if you're a teacher, I think likewise, if you see a student acting out in class, don't label that child as, okay, this is a student that always acts out, they like to be a class clown, and get annoyed with them. No, every behavior is communication. Take note of that particular teenager or child. Take note, what are they trying to convey? They're trying to communicate something. And then see if you can build a relationship and help them understand how they feel. So I think really, to sum it all up, think about your emotions. Emotions are so important, and I think it's so undervalued, especially not even in everyday world, but in a therapeutic world. I think it needs to be addressed. I think there's a space where you need to go, okay, what am I feeling? What to do about it? And I think this is really a good message that I can leave the listeners with.
Brilliant. Now, the last question, if anybody wants to reach out to you, you being a therapist, how can they reach out to you? And in terms of guidance and support, of course, you've given us all through the episodes, what do you do exactly with, the students or children that come to you? But just briefly, to just mention, what is it that you can do in terms of your support for our audiences?
I think if parents want to reach out, they are more than welcome to reach out either on my Instagram or give me a call. My contact details are on Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, on LinkedIn. But we also provide guidance for schools, for teachers, for counselors, for special educational leads, to how to deal with behavior within a school context, and how to help them to also identify the emotions, the psychological barriers, and how to deal with that within the school context, how to better communicate with parents. So for educators, teachers, teaching assistants, counselors, we are there to also support you. For parents, we're there to support you. You're welcome to reach out, ask for advice. We can definitely guide you in the right direction. And for the entire community, we are here. We are here to stay. We're here to support. So please feel free to reach out at any point.
Thank you so much, Ivan. That was such an insightful session.
Thank you.
I'm sure the audiences will have so much to take away.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It was lovely.
Pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Talks with Shahnaz Mirza. Do let us know, how did you find this episode? And if you'd like to hear anything in the future episodes, write to us. Also, if you'd like to reach out with a guest, his details shall be provided in the description section of the video. Also, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Till next time, this is Shahnaz Mirza signing off.